6 months ago I set up this awesome paludarium for my Vietnamese Mossy frogs. I think it looks good and it's grown in quite well, but I feel like I could do better, as well as provide a better home for the frogs. Over the course of this video, I'll show you how I created a new and improved Vietnamese Mossy frog paludarium. I'll show you everything I did, including making a new background, scaping, and planting the tank. Let's get started. The first order of business is to dismantle their current setup. Like I said, I was really happy with the end result of this one, and I am a bit sad to be dismantling it, considering it was my first video. However, I feel it wasn't necessarily ideal for my frogs, and I feel like I could make something even better. Luckily, I'll be able to salvage most of the plants and wood, but unfortunately stuff like the substrate and background are just going to have to be thrown away. I would have liked to keep the background and use it for smaller projects, but due to the way it was attached, it just wasn't possible. As for the substrate, it was just too dirty, it wasn't worth saving. Dismantling the tank itself was pretty easy, it was the stuff that followed that was hard. After I had everything dismantled, I was removing the tank from the stand so that I could take the background off and apply a new one, and the door fell off. Luckily the polycarbonate itself didn't crack, but the whole rim came off and I ended up having to redo part of it. I also ended up losing the footage of putting the new background on. Speaking of background, it's time to make a new one. I'll be using the usual foam and dry lock technique, starting with measuring and cutting the foam to size, and then snapping it in half. After getting the foam cut, I started drawing on the pattern. The pattern's pretty similar to the last one, but I wanted to make it look a little more rocky. The way I did that was make the edges and corners look a bit more rough. Then I used my wire brush drill bit to outline the shapes. Before starting this project, I was debating whether it was necessary to make a new background, and I came to the conclusion that although the previous one probably would have worked, it didn't look as good in detail as I wanted it to. It was the first background I made using this technique, so naturally I think I can make it better. Anyway, after outlining the shapes, I started to give it texture. I used a slightly different texturing method this time because I wanted to make it look more like rock. Once it was carved and sealed up with a heat gun, I started to paint it. As usual, I start with a thick base coat of dark gray, and then add progressively lighter dry brush coats. I used 2 coats on the last one, but I'll be using 3 on this one. I've been wanting to experiment with new background techniques, because although I think this one looks good, it's very time consuming. I've used the expanding foam topped with cocoa fiber method in the past, and I haven't had much luck with it. It doesn't look nearly as good as this, and it didn't hold up long term. Like I said, I lost the footage of applying the background to the tank, but you've seen that before. Anyway, after the silicone had cured, I started to scape the tank. Last time I placed individual branches vertically, but this time I wanted to place them horizontally. The reason I did this is because I was observing the behavior of the frogs, and they wanted to hang out on leaves and stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of leaves aren't strong enough to hold them, so I wanted to give them a place like this that could hold them. I'll still be adding a few thicker leaves that I think will be able to hold them, but I just wanted to give them this space just in case. I'm also planning on covering it in moss, so that way they'll feel more camouflaged. The wood was pretty stable as is, but I just wanted to make sure, so I siliconed it in place. Anyway, that completed the scape. Now it's time to add the substrate. I'll be using sand, so I want to make sure to cover the filter in gravel so it won't get clogged. I've had problems with choosing the right substrate for this tank in the past, but I had some extra sand lying around, so I thought I'd try it. After that, I started to make the land area by piling Cereus stone and adding bits of wood to it. Next thing to do is add the plants. Like usual, I take them out of their pots and start removing the soil from the roots. I ended up losing the footage of planting the tank, and I also ended up losing some of these plants. You'll see why later. With the first version of this tank, it took me quite a while to figure out what plants worked, so now I have a better idea. Once I had all the soil off the roots, I also took them outside and rinsed off any excess soil. Once the plants were ready, I scaped the tank and filled it up with water, and that's when it happened. So, it's the next day. I was just done last night. I didn't want to deal with anything else. It was awful. As you can see, my room is an absolute mess. There's rags and stuff moved everywhere, and you can see here the the damage. It's pretty bad. Luckily all the plants seem to be alright for now, and luckily the frogs weren't in there when it happened, but it's still a major setback and still kind of a big problem. But I'm gonna get some glass today for that, and then I'm gonna re-silicone it and we should be back on track. So that's what I did. I removed the old pieces of glass and attached a new one. After that I started to add new plants, and like I said earlier, most of the old ones died due to lack of humidity. I was still watering them multiple times a day, but I still ended up losing them anyway. I also ended up getting sick right after this happened, so that made things even worse. Anyway, some of the plants won't be in direct contact with water, so I'll counter that by adding sphagnum moss to the roots. I'll water this occasionally. After that, I added them to the tank. I found sphagnum moss to be a great way to keep these plants alive without them being in direct contact with water. I also added some to other plants around the tank. During this process, I also added moss to the wood. It won't stay by itself, so I'll secure it with thread. It looks pretty banged up now again due to lack of humidity, but it should come back within a few weeks. I also decided to add a few more branches that I tied Java moss to down in the water feature. Once those were in place, that completed the build. The new and improved Vietnamese Mossy frog Paludarium. Like I said, I really like the old one, but I think this is a huge improvement. It not only looks better and less messy, but it'll also provide better space for the frogs. I also forgot to mention earlier, but the drip wall feature is still in place, it just doesn't work as well. I mostly want to keep it so it retains humidity better. After all, mossy frogs need fairly high humidity. Anyway, I think this is my best tank yet. I know I say that with all of them, but my goal with every tank is to make it better than the last one. I think the plants all look so much better, and I think the frogs will enjoy it a lot more. I also think the moss adds so much. It was a pretty rough process making this tank, as so many things went wrong. But when you have enough passion for something, even when things get hard, you can get through them. I want to say a special thank you to everybody that was so patient with me for this one, because like I said, I was going through a lot at the time. I really appreciate you guys being patient and supporting me through the whole process. Anyway, that's all I got for you in this one. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!